What do you do when everything around you falls apart and a voice says, "Pray like this"? If this question has ever crossed your mind in a moment of despair, you're not alone. In a few minutes, I'll show you a practical method of prayer, inspired by the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, that can transform the way you seek spiritual protection when life seems to be falling apart. Have you ever been there? Stay with me until the end. What you discover now may surprise you. When we talk about Medjugorje, many think only of apparitions and distant tales. But Mary's messages offer simple and profound guidance for those seeking prayer in difficult times. These aren't empty formulas. They're an invitation to a change of heart, to a silence that listens more than it speaks, to a practical surrender that generates peace even amidst chaos. Throughout this introduction, I want you to feel like you're receiving something direct, an outstretched hand that teaches not just theories, but steps anyone can apply at home, alone, or with their family. Imagine the scene. Unexpected news, a bill that doesn't balance, an illness that arrives, insecurity that erodes sleep. In these moments, prayer becomes both a refuge and a tool. The 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, despite the mystery surrounding them, point precisely to routines and attitudes that protect and guide. And you don't need to be a card-carrying religious person to feel the effect. All it takes is openness, sincerity, and a willingness to practice. I'll show you how to transform pain into prayer that soothes, clarifies, and strengthens. When hearing "pray like this," many ask, how do I begin? Where do I pray when words fail me? In this video, you'll find practical answers, simple examples of prayer, small family rituals to protect the home, and above all, a change in attitude that Mary suggests in her messages: less demanding, more surrender, less noise, more listening. Strength doesn't come from pretty words, but from the persistence and humility of those who place themselves before God with an open heart. You'll learn to create a daily space for prayer that becomes a shield in times of trial. It's not a promise of an instant miracle, it's a journey. Many people who study Medjugorje report concrete results when adopting these practices: clearer decisions, closer families, a sense of presence that transcends loneliness. And this is exactly what we will address, with care and responsibility. Not selling illusions, but offering spiritual tools based on Mary's messages, presented in a didactic and accessible way. Throughout the video, I will also share brief testimonies and credible examples, so you can see how these practices work in everyday life. If you're seeking spiritual protection for your family, or want to know how to truly pray when the world is falling apart, this content is for you. Prepare to learn 5 practical steps, model prayer phrases you can repeat, and simple rituals to bless your home, all anchored in the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, without sensationalism, with respect and a sense of pastoral urgency. Stay with me until the end so you don't miss any details that can make a difference in your prayer routine. Now that you understand what's at stake and what to expect, take a deep breath. The first step is always the simplest, and it's where transformation begins. Next, I'll guide you through the first practical principle, and together, we'll discover how Mary taught us to pray when the world falls apart. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most. What word or image touched your heart? Also, share a brief experience, even if it's just a sigh of relief you felt upon hearing it, because hearing your stories helps others not feel alone when the world falls apart. When you comment, it's not just text on a screen, it's a real person saying, "I've been through this too," or "I want to try this practice." And this creates a support network that transforms simple videos into a space for healing. If you identify with this, give it a like. It's a simple gesture, but it shows that this content is valuable and worth continuing to produce with care and responsibility. And if you want to follow the next practical steps, model prayers, quick rituals for the family, and real testimonies, subscribe to the channel. That way, I know I need to bring more guides like this, and more people are reached by a message of hope that can truly make a difference. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. And I promise to use every comment and every like to adjust, improve, and deepen what I bring you. Feel free to be honest and write from the heart. Your story could be the beacon someone needs right now. Take another deep breath. Moving on, let's delve into the first practical principle: total surrender, and I'll guide you step by step to put this attitude into practice in your daily life. Take another deep breath. When we talk about the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, we're not just delving into another topic of religious curiosity or another behind-the-scenes enigma. We are touching on a practical dimension of spirituality that has a direct impact on the journey of those seeking protection, direction, and inner transformation. These messages are called unrevealed because, over the years, much has remained shrouded in silence. There are public announcements, there are testimonies from visionaries, and there are signs circulating among communities. But there is also a layer of details, emphases, and concrete practices that have not reached the general public in an explained or organized way. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's a truth hidden by the volume of reports and the speed with which information spreads. And here comes the crucial point. There's a detail that few realize, and it changes everything. The messages are not primarily a set of spectacular predictions, but a manual for inner transformation and mentality that teaches how to pray, how to make decisions in crisis, and how to protect one's family in times of uncertainty. That's why they're so interesting to those seeking signs and spiritual protection, not because they promise easy answers, but because they offer a way of life, a daily practice that changes the way we see reality, reduces panic, and strengthens faith. When I say manual, I don't mean something dry or dogmatic. I refer to principles that are repeated in various messages: surrender, silence, conversion, family prayer, home blessing, perseverance, and trust. These principles alone change mindsets. They become lenses for interpreting events, tools for choosing reactions, and routines that shape decisions. Imagine someone faced with devastating news. Without an inner ritual, the mind tends to spin between fear and anger. With a small habit of surrender and listening, that same person finds space to discern, to act with greater clarity, to make decisions that are not born of desperation, but of a calm built daily. The impact of this is not insignificant. It transforms relationships, alters financial priorities, and often restructures a family's own faith journey. And this transformation has a compounding effect. Small, repeated practices lead to profound changes over time, like drops that erode stone and create new paths. That's why when someone talks about spiritual protection in relation to what they're really referring to isn't a magical shield against everything that can happen, but a set of habits that make people less vulnerable to despair and more able to respond wisely. In practice, this means teaching short prayers that act as an anchor, simple house blessing rituals that solidify a sense of security, and inner listening practices that allow us to distinguish between intuition and anxiety. All of this sounds simple because it is simple, and it's precisely in this simplicity that its power lies. When we demystify the idea that the sacred must be complex, we give people something they can truly apply, even in the midst of everyday chaos. And this accessibility broadens the reach of the messages. It's not just deeply religious people who can benefit. Anyone open to a change of mindset and small practical decisions can reap the rewards. At the same time, it's important to speak honestly about the ambiguity that accompanies stories of apparitions and messages. There are divergent interpretations, different cultural contexts, and some see exaggeration where others see consolation. This ambivalence doesn't diminish the usefulness of these practices. On the contrary, it calls us to a posture of responsible discernment. Discerning isn't about doubting everything, but rather testing practices in the fire of everyday experience. If a prayer brings calm that leads to better decisions, it has value. If a behavior generates division and fear, it needs to be reevaluated. This is another point few people realize. The message of protection isn't intended to multiply panic, but to form communities that support one another and make informed decisions. And in this process, personal revelations emerge, small epiphanies that, when combined, become life-changing. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the reason behind the term unrevealed leads us to a field of practical study. Many of these guidelines first reached closed circles, families, prayer groups, local outreach workers, and were subsequently tested as prayer methods in real-life crisis situations. With each test, some practices proved especially effective. Brief moments of silence before prayer, a surrender formula that exchanges a list of demands for trust, a house blessing routine that creates a rhythm of presence, simple prayers that unite husband and wife, parents and children, creating a collective spiritual resilience. It is in this tested in practice that the power of the unrevealed messages lies. They are not just pretty words, they are life protocols that have passed the sieve of human experience. And when something is tested and proven repeatedly, its impact ceases to be merely spiritual and becomes transformational in the way families make decisions and choose priorities. Think of the stories you've heard: neighbors who reconnected, decisions that avoided breakups, people who found the courage to change jobs or ask for forgiveness. Many of these small victories are indirect effects of a mindset shift driven by simple prayer practices. The behind-the-scenes nature of these changes is rarely dramatic. They're mornings of silence, minutes of surrender, hands held around the table before meals, yet the impact is profound because it acts at the core of relationships and choices. And here comes a truth worth emphasizing. Depth lies not in the complexity of rituals, but in the integrity with which they are lived. A short prayer, repeated with sincerity, can have more power than long words recited out of obligation. This is one of the revelations few expect and many discover along the way. All of this shows that behind the aura of mystery, the 7 unread messages are, above all, an invitation to daily practice, a call for inner change that translates into concrete actions. They ask us to rethink our mindset: less rushing, more listening; less demanding, more surrender; less isolation, more family prayer. And when this rethinking happens, the feeling of vulnerability in the face of chaos diminishes. because we begin to rely on habits that sustain us. Now, following this line of reasoning and this logic of practical application, let's explore each of these principles in detail, starting with what many consider the first and most challenging: total surrender. Comment: this makes sense to me now. I want to delve even deeper into this subject. To understand why the 7 unrevealed messages deserve attention, and why they also deserve caution, we need to look behind the scenes of what we call testimony. The Medjugorje visionaries are ordinary people who, for decades, transmitted stories that touched entire communities. This lends authority to the subject, but this authority is only established when the guidance is tested and bears fruit in real life. When invitations to surrender, silence, and conversion generate tangible transformation in everyday decisions. It is this combination of message and practice that gives substance to what might otherwise be merely intellectual curiosity. There are those who expect spectacular signs, and there are those who minimize everything with skepticism. The most useful approach is discernment, opening oneself to possibility while simultaneously applying simple criteria. Discernment isn't disbelief or automatic acceptance. It's evaluating whether the practice brings peace, improves relationships, and helps with concrete choices. If a prayer routine teaches someone to breathe before acting, if a home blessing makes a couple talk instead of exploding, this is a sign of real impact, not just rhetoric. This is how hidden truth ceases to be an enigma and becomes a tool for transformation. The history of apparitions has cultural layers and nuances that are lost in various translations and interpretations. Therefore, it is essential to maintain intellectual humility. Details that make sense in one local context may be confusing in another. My approach here is that of a responsible guide, presenting the scenario, distinguishing between account and application, and offering testable paths that you can try in your daily life, without relying on intermediaries. This care prevents the search for revelations from becoming a source of anxiety or division, and places the emphasis where it belongs. On the personal journey and practical impact, the community dimension is central to this process. Many practices that emerged around Medjugorje gained strength through being lived in groups, family prayers, blessings between neighboring homes, nights of silence and community. The spiritual protection these messages propose doesn't function as an individual, instantaneous shield, but as a network of habits that sustains us in difficult times. When simple routines become habits of prayer before meals, a minute of silence in the morning, the compound effect on relationships and the ability to make more lucid decisions is remarkable. The change in mentality spreads: less reactivity, more presence, less panic, more planning. Spiritual prudence is a healthy break that prevents fanaticism and dependency. But it's no excuse for inertia. It invites us to test for a defined period and honestly evaluate results. Trying a short routine of surrender and listening for 7 days is usually enough to see if there's a change in mindset and behavior. If the practice brings calm, promotes dialogue, and helps with decision-making, it deserves further exploration. If, on the contrary, it increases division or fear, it's time to reevaluate. This practical approach is a powerful tool for navigating the gap between revelations and exaggerations. Behind the scenes of the journey, simple and consistent stories emerge. Families who reorganized their priorities after introducing a daily blessing. Couples who resumed communication after nights of silence. People who found the courage to make difficult decisions because they began to surrender what they had no control over. These revelations aren't always dramatic. They are gradual, changes that affect the way people live, work, and relate. The real impact manifests itself in everyday decisions, job choices, financial priorities, time dedicated to family, and that's where the transformation becomes concrete. To illustrate this in a practical way, imagine starting your day with 5 minutes of silence and a short surrender phrase, something like, "I surrender what I cannot control." Then, take a minute to listen, without thinking about responses. Repeating this ritual for a few days creates space for less impulsive decisions. Another simple protocol is a quick blessing of the house before meals, a gesture that, when repeated, reinforces cohesion and reduces tension. I call these procedures life protocols, short, replicable, and verifiable practices that anyone can incorporate without any fuss. The effectiveness of these routines doesn't require sensationalism, it requires discipline and repetition. It's also important to recognize limits. Spiritual practices are no substitute for professional support when there are clinical, legal, or violence-related issues. Discernment includes seeking appropriate help whenever necessary. What the unspoken messages offer is complementary spiritual support, a shift in mindset that favors surrender, perseverance, and choices more aligned with deep values. Combined with practical actions and professional support when needed, this approach provides comprehensive care for the individual and their family. My role as a guide is to present each principle clearly, offer testable examples, and propose verification questions you can use as a personal thermometer. Has anxiety decreased? Has communication at home improved? Have decisions become more consistent with your values? These simple metrics help assess the impact. The content's authority here doesn't come from easy promises, but from offering verifiable paths that can generate real transformation in your journey. Following this logic of practical application and accountability, the next step is to dive into the principles one by one, demonstrating short exercises and ways to measure results. The idea is for you to leave with tools, not just ideas. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Total surrender, as the first message translated into practice, is neither a theatrical gesture nor passive resignation. It is a concrete change of mindset that transforms prayer from a list of requests into an act of trust that alters decisions and behaviors. When life falls apart, it's easy to fall into the temptation of reducing prayer to a catalog of wishes. Give me this, solve that, save so-and-so from this pain. This type of prayer fuels anxiety because it keeps the person in the same emotional place. The feeling of failing control intensifies because the inner voice continues to test solutions, demanding immediate answers. Surrendering, on the other hand, is a strategic move. It's choosing a stance that reorganizes priorities, reduces mental noise, and creates space for wiser decisions. It's not giving up, it's redirecting energy. And that's precisely where the transformative power of this practice lies, its impact on the personal journey and the family environment. Imagine for a moment the scene we described earlier. Open hands, breathing out tension, a close-up revealing tired eyes searching for direction. Total surrender begins with a simple physical gesture. Leashing your fists, relaxing your shoulders consolidates into a short phrase that can be repeated whenever your mind tries to return to wish list mode. A practical direct prayer might sound like this: Lady, I surrender what I cannot control. Guide my steps and give me courage for today's decisions. There's no need to fill it with words. What matters is the intention exchanging demands for trust, an exchange that changes your mindset. This model phrase works like a life protocol. Short, repeatable, verifiable. Repeat it for 7 days and observe the compounding effect. Surrender, repeated, becomes a habit. The habit, in turn, changes the way you approach complex problems and the way you make decisions under pressure. Total surrender also has a hidden truth. Many people imagine that surrendering means abdicating responsibility. In practice, it's the opposite. Surrendering well requires clarity of action and firmness in choices. By surrendering what is not under your control, you free up mental and emotional resources to act more precisely on what truly depends on you. In practical terms, this translates into more coherent decisions, prioritizing difficult conversations, seeking technical support when necessary, organizing finances, and preserving relationships. Surrendering transforms frustration into strategic action, not passivity. It's a revelation that many only understand behind the scenes. The peace that comes from surrender empowers you to act better, not to give up. Within the family, the practice of surrender has a direct impact. When a member of the household adopts a surrender posture, the emotional climate changes. Arguments tend to de-escalate because tension is diffused by presence and the recognition of what is and isn't controllable. The surrender taught by Maria, applied as a brief routine before meals or upon waking, becomes a catalyst for dialogue, reduces reactivity, and creates a space where joint decisions flow more lucidly. Imagine a couple who, before reacting to bad news, pauses for 3 breaths and repeats the surrender phrase. This pause creates space for helpful questions. What do we need to do now? What is within our control? Practical transformation emerges precisely there. Decisions made with less panic, more alignment of priorities, and greater focus on what generates results. Another essential aspect is consistency. Total surrender works best when integrated into small daily rituals that together produce a compound effect. Think of microhabits: a minute of surrender before bed, a surrender phrase when getting into the car, a quick collective repetition at the table. These life protocols are the gears that move the mindset shift from the abstract to the concrete. Frequency is more important than the grandiosity of the gesture. A short practice, repeated with sincerity, generates internal revelations that manifest in more coherent choices over time. This is the silent and powerful impact doors that gradually open decisions that align with values and a growing sense of personal integrity. Total commitment also requires a period of verification, an intentional period of practice to evaluate results. It's not about trying and abandoning the first attempt. It's about applying it with discipline for days and then checking simple indicators. Was there a reduction in anxiety? Did decisions become clearer? Did family dialogue improve? These practical metrics are the way to bring spirituality into the realm of measurable change. The combination of faith and method produces transformation because it offers a language of evaluation. Faith guides, indicators show the impact. This combination takes spirituality out of the realm of abstractions and places it on the safe ground of decisions and results. it's important to emphasize limits and complementarities. Total surrender does not replace professional support when needed. Mental health, legal, or violence issues require qualified intervention. What surrender offers is a spiritual support that, combined with practical actions and professional help when needed, constitutes comprehensive care. This integration is one of the most practical revelations many discover along their journey. Spirituality works best when it connects with real life, when it inspires rational decisions and practical approaches. In practice, you can start today with a simple exercise. Stop for a minute, release physical tension. Verbalize the surrender phrase quietly and take 3 deep breaths. Observe the sensations, perhaps an immediate calming, perhaps just a slight opening. Repeat for a week and record small differences in the choices you make. The goal isn't to produce spectacular transformations immediately, but to create an internal environment that favors decisions aligned with purpose and peace. Total surrender reduces the useless consumption of emotional energy and directs your capacity toward what makes a real impact on your life and the lives of those around you. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding surrender as a practice is just the beginning. Its power is revealed when combined with the silence we'll explore next, and with the conversion that expands its reach. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Silence isn't empty. It's fertile territory where a tired mind finds soil to germinate clearer decisions. And that's precisely why Maria, in the messages we studied, insists on a practice that seems simple but has enormous impact: reducing noise. When we cut out external noise, fewer notifications, less auto-scrolling, fewer comparisons that erode peace, we make room to hear something that's often drowned out by haste and fear. It's in silence that direction appears. Often, the solution doesn't come in the form of a brilliant idea, but in a calm that allows us to distinguish between reaction and response, between impulse and deliberate choice. And this difference alters trajectories. A decision made calmly is more likely to result in transformation than one made in the heat of panic. The mindset born of silence isn't passive, it's strategic, because it transforms emotional energy into clarity. And this clarity guides decisions that reverberate in personal life, family, and even professional priorities. Practicing silence doesn't require a 2-week spiritual retreat. It requires micro-habits that fit into daily life and create a compounding effect. 5 minutes right after waking up, without a screen, without a schedule, just breathing and listening, works like a reset. Another option is a digital pause before bed, turning off notifications for an hour, allowing thoughts to settle, and using this space to listen without seeking immediate answers, but rather welcoming sensations and internal signals. In family contexts, this silence can be shared 5 minutes together before meals, holding hands, a collective breath that serves as a reorientation ritual. These simple gestures shift relational dynamics. The practical impact appears in the conversations that follow, in decisions that become more cooperative and less impulsive. Behind the scenes of many transformation stories we've heard, this was the first concrete step: stopping, listening, letting the heart open before speaking. There's a hidden truth to this that few people emphasize. Silence allows spirituality and reason to dialogue. Rather than seeing faith and discernment as opposing options, silence creates a space where both meet. By silencing anxiety, we make room for informed intuition, for that inner voice that is often accessed more clearly when the mind is not saturated with stimuli. And this intuition, when accompanied by small verification techniques, such as writing down what comes silently, checking facts, and consulting trusted people, becomes a concrete tool for The combination of inner listening and practical verification is a method of action that reduces risks and increases the likelihood of positive results. It's a path of gradual revelations, small epiphanies that, combined, have the power to profoundly change. Taking a break from social media deserves special mention. Social media is designed to sustain attention, not to fuel reflection. When we allow our feeds to dictate the pace of our thoughts, actions, and priorities, our journey loses direction. Introducing regular screen-free moments, even if it's just 10 minutes after waking up and 10 before bed, works as a life protocol that protects focus, preserves emotional sanity, and fosters a more deliberate mindset. In practical terms, this translates into fewer impulsive decisions, fewer comparisons, and more time dedicated to what truly matters: real conversations, focused work, and prayer with presence. The impact is less immediate spectacle and more structural change. You begin to act more aligned with your values, and this coherence reduces noise and increases the sense of purpose. Active listening, in turn, is a skill that can be trained. It's not just remaining silent. It's listening with intention, seeking to understand before responding, welcoming without judgment. In a family, this changes everything. A child who feels their voice is heard opens up. A spouse who senses attention connects. Joint decisions flow better when we truly listen. Practice asking open-ended questions. How are you feeling about this? What do you think we need to do now? And then allow the person to speak. Reinforcing this habit creates an environment where collective prayer ceases to be a recitation. It becomes a sincere sharing of anxieties and hopes, a powerful ground for spiritual protection and wiser decisions. There are also simple protocols that integrate silence and discernment. One is the Thriquist exercise. Before reacting to news, stop and ask, is this urgent? Is this important? Does this depend on me? This filter, applied during the pause that silence provides, reduces anxiety and guides actions. Another useful practice is a brief journal. Write down in a few minutes what emerged in the silence. Record intuitions, and days later, compare whether what seemed important in the calm has been confirmed in practice. These tools bring metrics to spirituality, a measurable transformation that helps assess impact. The mindset ceases to be abstract and begins to have indicators that allow for informed decisions. It's important to emphasize limits. Silence is not an antidote to all crises. Some problems require swift action, technical support, or professional help. Inner listening must go hand in hand with the search for practical solutions. However, qualified silence improves the quality of these solutions. A decision made with less noise tends to be more effective and less emotionally costly. This combination of interiority and practical action is one of the revelations that the unrevealed messages of Medjugorje bring behind the scenes. It's not about mystical isolation, but a life strategy that readjusts priorities and favors wiser choices. Integrating silence into your routine requires discipline and self-kindness. Start with small goals, record simple results, less irritability, better nights of sleep, deeper conversations, and gradually expand. Observe how the transformation affects important decisions. Perhaps you'll start choosing work opportunities more carefully or dedicate quality time to your family. These effects are subtle but cumulative. The power of silence lies in its effective nature. It reconnects you with your essence, with what truly matters, and shifts your focus from the spectacle to what generates lasting impact. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because silence, when combined with the surrender we discussed earlier, creates a fertile space where conversion and perseverance can flourish more powerfully. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Conversion of the heart is not a distant concept or a nice word to end a prayer. It is a practical movement that redefines the way we view mistakes, wounds, and decisions. When we speak of practical repentance, we are talking about something that manifests itself in small gestures and concrete choices. Acknowledging when we have erred, sincerely asking for forgiveness, making amends whenever possible, and, above all, returning to humility as a daily posture. This posture changes our mindset because it shifts the focus of attention from the ego to the inner truth, and that is where the transformation begins to operate almost imperceptibly, until the impact is seen in decisions and relationships. In practice, conversion is not empty self-criticism or punishment. It is a realignment. It is admitting, I was wrong, and then choosing an action that demonstrates repentance. Not just words that attempt to clear the conscience. There's a hidden truth that few clearly mention. We often confuse conversion with spiritual spectacular. We wait for grandiose signs, a dramatic moment that changes everything. True conversion, however, happens in small repetitions, in the humility of acknowledging a mistake with a family member, in the gesture of repairing an emotional debt with sincere words, in the decision to replace a destructive behavior with one that cultivates peace. This process has unglamorous background, difficult conversations, sleepless nights, decisions to cut out something that fueled anxiety, but the impact is profound because these choices restore trust, emotional health, and coherence in relationships. Transformation is slow but cumulative, and when we add these small acts over time, the journey produces changes that are reflected in how we make important decisions. A practical path to conversion of heart includes simple, replicable steps. First, the practice of inner honesty, looking at yourself without masks, acknowledging what was done without minimizing it. Second, verbalizing repentance, concretely, not a vague sorry, but a brief explanation of what you understand by the error and what you intend to change. Third, a gesture of reparation. If you were offended, seek to make amends. If you were hurt, listen actively. If you acted negligently, take practical responsibility. Finally, establish a routine for returning to humility. Short prayers of commitment, a phrase of reparation in the morning or before bed, and a small discipline of self-correction when old patterns threaten to return. These elements transform conversion into a concrete tool for character formation and responsibility. The prayer of reparation that accompanies this practice should be simple and forceful. Something you can say without artifice and with sincerity. A practical suggestion could be this: Madame, I acknowledge my error. I ask forgiveness for a name, of gesture, or word. Help me to make amends and choose the path of humility today. Prayer is not magic. It is a verbal commitment that helps solidify the internal decision. Saying the phrase attentively, repeating it for a few days, and seeking a concrete action to support it. A sincere message, a personal apology, material reparation if necessary, ensures that the prayer is part of a real and measurable process. This is the key point. Faith combined with action generates change. Faith without action tends to remain rhetoric. Empathy is a key element in this journey. Recognizing that we all fail creates a less accusatory environment and one more conducive to healing. When a community or family adopts practices of collective conversion, for example, a brief moment of confession and commitment before meals, relationships tend to rebuild trust more quickly, because shared vulnerability builds bridges. This doesn't mean tolerating abusive behavior or avoiding boundaries. Rather, it means establishing protocols of emotional accountability that guide decisions and transform conflicts into opportunities for growth. The messages we studied point to this wisdom. It's not the spectacle of blame that heals, but the sincerity of recognition followed by coherent actions. There's also a strategic dimension. Conversion of the heart improves the quality of decisions, because it reduces defensive bias. When we acknowledge a mistake without theatrics, we open up space to listen to advice, learn, and recalibrate priorities. In practical terms, this can translate into choosing a better business partner, prioritizing quality time with family, or making wiser financial decisions. The change in mindset that results from conversion is, therefore, both moral and pragmatic. It generates integrity and more accurate results. This is an important argument for those seeking real transformation, because it shows that spirituality and practical effectiveness can go hand in hand. When discussing repentance, it's also important to recognize limits and avoid toxic guilt. Healthy conversion points to accountability, not self-annihilation. In cases of trauma or abuse, the primary responsibility does not lie with the survivor. In these contexts, seeking professional and community support is essential. Applying the spiritual practices we discuss should always be accompanied by common sense, and when appropriate, psychological, legal, or medical counseling. Mixing spiritualization with denial of violence would be a dangerous hidden truth. Therefore, discernment and spiritual prudence remain essential steps along the way. Another practical point. True conversion often requires a personal action plan. After acknowledging the mistake and asking for forgiveness, think of 3 concrete actions that demonstrate change. They can be simple: calling someone who hurt you, rearranging your schedule to prioritize family, seeking counseling for a harmful habit. Recording these actions and revisiting them regularly creates basic metrics for verification. Transformation isn't just talk. It's reflected in decisions and results. This small goal approach ensures that the conversion journey doesn't get lost in good intentions, but rather translates into tangible, sustainable changes. The journey of heart conversion is ultimately one of the central pieces of the transformation proposed by the unrevealed messages. It calls for courage to look within, discipline to repair, and humility to accept the need to change. It's not a single step, but a continuous movement that affects the mindset, relationships, and decisions of those who sincerely practice it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. And, from this point on, we'll see how these seeds of repentance and humility intertwine with family prayer and the daily protection of the home. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. When we talk about family prayer and domestic protective rituals, we're not just reciting pretty words. We're describing an effective and spiritual technology that alters the home's mindset, improves the quality of decisions, and has a real impact on daily life. Collective prayer creates a field of presence where tensions dissipate more quickly, where decision-making shifts from selfish impulses to being guided by shared values. This is one of the practical revelations that many never share behind the scenes. Spiritual life practiced in a group has a compound effect. A 3-minute ritual, repeated daily acts as an internal policy that regenerates relationships, reduces stress, and facilitates wiser choices in the face of crises. Think of the home as an emotional organism. When everyone carries anxiety, the dynamics become chaotic. When there's a small ritual that signals presence, responsibility, and care, the organism breathes together. Prayer before meals is perhaps the most accessible and powerful protocol. It doesn't require a complex liturgy. Just someone calmly invites and says a short phrase of intention, something like, "We are grateful for this food. We ask for strength, wisdom, and protection for our family." Simple, repeatable, and inclusive. The gesture of joining hands, looking into the eyes of the person next to you for a few seconds, and breathing before the first bite creates a microclimate of presence that reverberates throughout the day. Decisions about money, time, and affection, made in an environment where these small signals are frequent, tend to be more cohesive and less reactive. A quick nighttime blessing is another protocol with a high emotional return. It could be a 60-second moment before each person goes to their room, in which they say something like, "May this house be protected. May the fruit of our decisions today bring us closer to good. May no evil come our way." This type of ritual has enormous symbolic value. It communicates to family members a shared commitment to care and safety. In practical terms, this commitment reduces impulsive arguments, decreases episodes of isolation, and fosters restorative conversations when necessary. Repetition transforms the home into a predictable and safe space, and predictability has been shown to reduce collective anxiety and facilitate more thoughtful choices. For families with children, adapting language and gestures is essential. Transform the ritual into something playful and tangible, lighting a small candle safely, making a symbolic hand gesture, or using a keyword that children repeat, peace or courage. For example, including children not only gives them a sense of belonging, but also establishes a mindset of emotional responsibility from an early age. These practices act as decision-making training. A child accustomed to pausing, breathing, and saying a word of intention tends to develop better mechanisms for dealing with frustrations and choices in adulthood. The seed planted in simple rituals bears concrete fruit in future behavior and decisions. In homes where there's resistance, whether due to disbelief, fatigue, or conflict, it's important to start small and respect rhythms. A gentle entry protocol can work. One person begins the practice, invites people without pressure, and proposes a 7-day trial. At the end of this period, the impact is assessed through practical indicators. Were there fewer arguments? Did they sleep better? Did conversations become calmer? Using simple metrics prevents spirituality from becoming an imposed dogma and allows the family to verify, through daily data, the real benefits. This practical approach of verification is a strategy that brings faith closer to effectiveness. If something improves coexistence and decision-making, it deserves to be maintained. If not, it can be adjusted. In addition to verbal prayers, physical rituals in the home contribute to creating a protective environment. Cleaning the house with intention, for example, not just sweeping, but doing so with an inner listening ear, and a purposeful phrase transforms a household chore into an act of spiritual care. Placing a symbolic object at the entrance, across an icon, or simply a framed image with words of commitment, acts as a memory trigger. Upon crossing the threshold, members are reminded of the shared intention and naturally regulate behaviors and decisions. These physical cues have a measurable psychological impact. They reduce stress activation and increase feelings of security, which in turn improve the quality of everyday choices. Another practical resource is the Weekly Protection Circle, a 5 to 10-minute mini-family meeting for emotional check-ins, practical adjustments, and short prayers. This gathering serves as the home's emotional governance's small strategic space where decisions about spending, schedules, childcare, and relationship priorities are aligned. The practice teaches that spirituality is also management, managing affection, time, and resources with intention. This type of routine transforms the home into a laboratory for change, where decisions are made more consciously and with less chance of impulsive regret. The language of family prayers should be inclusive and action-oriented. Avoid long sermons. Opt for brief statements that convert intention into action. Practical examples. May we have the patience to listen. May our decisions protect the people we love. May we have the courage to repair what has been broken. These phrases not only invoke symbolic protection, they align the mind with concrete behaviors. Repeating them creates a mindset of accountability and a readiness to act with integrity when difficult decisions arise. Don't forget, gratitude, rituals. Taking a moment to be thankful for small victories throughout the day helps refocus from what's missing to what's already positive. This shift in attention has a direct impact on subsequent decisions, as grateful people tend to choose with more generosity and less fear. In terms of transformation, this shift in mental scope is powerful. It corrects the natural tendency to magnify problems and minimize resources, and this impacts the priorities and actions that shape family life. Finally, it's important to integrate these practices with external support when necessary. If there are conflicts that can't be resolved through rituals, seeking counseling, family therapy, or pastoral guidance is wise and consistent with spiritual prudence. Prayers and blessings create fertile soil, but the harvest also depends on practical actions and, sometimes, professional interventions. This integration of spirituality and practical action reinforces the central idea we've been exploring. The unrevealed messages don't promise isolated miracles, but offer methods that, combined with responsible decisions, produce real impact. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because collective prayer and home protection only reach their full power when rooted in the humility, perseverance, and conversion we've already discussed. It's at this intersection that routines become truly transformative. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Remaining in prayer when you see no answer requires more than goodwill. It requires a change of mindset that transforms suffering into a sustainable practice, a routine that doesn't depend on the mood of the day, but on a commitment to one's own journey. There is a hidden truth that few speak candidly. Spiritual perseverance is not a momentary heroic state. It is a daily practice that hones the ability to make decisions under pressure, to resist discouragement, and to keep one's gaze focused. On a larger horizon, when the world seems to be falling apart, the temptation is to seek quick solutions, impulsive decisions, shortcuts that promise immediate relief. The practice of perseverance, on the contrary, invites a patient inner architecture, a slow construction, made of small, repeated acts that, together, produce a profound impact on choices, relationships, and the ability to face crises. Trust in providence doesn't mean passivity. It means acting responsibly while keeping the root of hope alive. It's common to think that trust is simply waiting for something to happen. In fact, trusting effectively requires aligning practical actions with a centered heart. This transforms prayer into a driver of decision-making. It doesn't replace financial planning, healthcare, or seeking technical help, but it provides emotional stability so these actions can be taken with greater clarity. The mindset born of this conviction reduces panic, reduces hasty mistakes, and allows us to see opportunities where, before, there was only despair. In other words, well-applied faith improves the quality of decisions. Let me tell you a short story to illustrate the point, one that exemplifies the behind-the-scenes nature of this transformation, and that is not dramatic, but deeply human. I met a man named Jerome, not his real name, who, in a short space of time, lost his job and received a diagnosis that frightened his family. His initial reaction was the same as many: panic, hours spent desperately searching for solutions, sleepless nights. But Joe decided to test a simple discipline he learned in a prayer group inspired by the messages of Medjugorje. Every day, upon waking, he dedicated 5 minutes to total surrender. 3 times a day, he took a 2-minute silent pause, and every night, he set aside a brief moment to ask forgiveness for where he had failed, and to talk with his wife about the next day's practical steps. It wasn't an instant miracle. Contracts didn't reappear, and the illness required treatment. But something changed in the way Joe made decisions. Instead of accepting the first job offer, he used these moments of silence to evaluate what he truly needed. Instead of acting out of fear, he spoke to professionals, prioritized organizing his finances, and sought psychological support when anxiety hit. The impact was cumulative. The family, previously living in constant tension, began to have calmer nights, financial decisions became more thoughtful, and the relationship between him and his wife became more sincere. The transformation wasn't magical, it was the result of routine, discipline, and continuous choice. This simple story contains important insights. Perseverance transforms conflict into decision, and persistent prayer serves as a guide to better actions. There's a practical framework that supports this approach. First, establish short, achievable routines. There's no point in promising long prayers if life demands pragmatism. Micro-habits, those are what stick. Second, create personal indicators. To measure effects: fewer sleepless nights, reduced impulsive reactions, greater clarity in financial or relationship decisions. Third, combine prayer with action. Seeking help, planning, adjusting your diet, seeking legal or medical support as needed. This combination of interiority and practical action is the heart of real impact. Spiritual perseverance improves decision-making because it reduces emotional noise and increases sensitivity to signs that were previously ignored. Small revelations that appear in everyday life and that, accumulated, change the course of life. Another aspect that deserves attention is the role of the community in this process. Persevering alone is tiring. Persevering in a network gives strength. When prayer practices become a family routine or become part of a supportive group, resilience increases. The unspoken messages emphasize this aspect. Protection and guidance often manifest themselves more clearly in community contexts, where responsibility is shared and decisions are made collectively with greater balance. In practical terms, this means having someone to talk to in difficult times, a faithful person who helps verify decisions and offers perspective when discouragement threatens to take hold. Community life functions as a laboratory for choices. In conversations, corrections, and sharing, paths emerge that might not be perceived individually. Persisting in a spiritual routine also transforms the way we view time. In crisis situations, time seems to compress, and urgency distorts priorities. Perseverance reconfigures this perception. It teaches us to see time as a space for gradual construction, where small daily decisions have a cumulative effect. This shift in mindset favors more strategic decisions, thinking long-term, prioritizing relationships, building reserves, investing in emotional health. The practical impact is clear: less impetuous decisions, more aligned with values, and more likely to generate stability. Perseverance, therefore, is not about escaping reality, but learning to navigate it with the right tools. It's also important to talk about pain that lingers without apparent resolution. In these situations, maintaining spiritual routines requires quiet courage. Perseverance doesn't promise immediate answers, but it offers emotional support that helps bridge the gap between question and answer. Maintaining short practices of surrender, silence, and daily conversion creates a kind of inner cushion that absorbs shocks and allows one to rebuild. The journey may seem slow, almost invisible, but over time, revelations begin to emerge. Decisions that once seemed impossible become feasible. Broken relationships find space for repair. Discernment becomes clearer. This process is, above all, transformation, a shift in mindset that redirects energy toward what truly matters. Perseverance also requires humility to accept limits and seek help when needed. It's not spiritual pride to maintain practices while avoiding professional treatment or legal support. Integrity means combining faith with responsibility, following prayer routines while also consulting experts, managing resources, and protecting the vulnerable. This integration is one of the practical insights of the messages we studied in the script. Spirituality and concrete action go hand in hand and amplify the impact of decisions. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because perseverance, when rooted in surrender, silence, and conversion, creates a field where trust in providence ceases to be theory and becomes a lived experience, guiding decisions with greater clarity and courage. Comment: I'm on this journey, too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. And from here, I want to transform what we've discussed into clear practice. A kind of mini-guide you can apply today so that prayer stops being a vague intention and becomes an instrument of real transformation in your decisions and in the life of your family. The first step is simple and immediate. Silence for 5 minutes. It's not symbolic, it's strategic. When you wake up, put away your cell phone, sit for 5 minutes, and just breathe. During this time, don't search for answers. Allow your mind to calm down. Repeat a short phrase that acts as an anchor. I surrender what I cannot control. This small practice of silence creates fertile ground for the next action and already changes your mindset for the day. The hidden truth here is that those who learn to stop before reacting avoid many mistakes that arise from haste. Then, convert pain into concrete surrender. It's not about denying suffering, but naming it and offering it. Say softly, with sincerity, something like, "Lady, I embrace this pain and surrender my will to control. Guide me in today's decisions." This model prayer breaks the cycle of wish lists and redirects your energy toward actions that truly impact, because well-done surrender frees up emotional resources to plan, act, and protect those you love. Then, ask for conversion with a practical gesture. Choose a short phrase of reparation to repeat throughout the week. Help me choose humility and repair what I have hurt, and accompany this phrase with a simple gesture, such as touching your chest, or writing 3 actions of reparation in your notebook. Conversion of the heart is not just a feeling. It needs concrete paths to sustain it, and recording intentions transforms a promise into a commitment. Also include prayer for the family as a non-negotiable routine. Before meals, before bed, or upon entering the house, take a minute to say something direct that unites and protects. May our decisions today be for the life and good of those we love. May there be peace in choosing wisely. Use this phrase as a protocol. Short, repeatable, shared. Collective prayer creates a field where decisions move from isolated reactions to the orbit of common care. This is the kind of impact that, with discipline, redefines priorities and reduces conflict. The fourth movement is to practice intentional perseverance for a 7-day cycle. It doesn't have to be grand. Define daily micro-habits that you will actually do. 5 minutes of silence upon waking, the surrender phrase at noon, family prayer at night, and commit to maintaining this cycle for a week. Record small metrics. Was there less irritation? Did you sleep better? Did conversations at home change? Evaluating with simple criteria transforms spirituality into a measurable process and reveals whether the method is having an impact. Perseverance isn't stubborn resistance, it's methodical testing. Experiment, measure, adjust. This way you transform intuition into a life methodology, and this change in mindset is what supports more coherent and less impulsive decisions in the heat of a crisis. The fifth step is to combine everything with practical action. Prayer and silence don't replace action, but guide it. After each moment of surrender and listening, make a short list of concrete, actionable actions for that situation: calling a support service, sorting documents, seeking a counselor, reorganizing expenses. Use the phrase, "Guide my steps to act wisely" before each task, and focus on decisions that yield real results. This combination of interiority and pragmatic planning is the great practical revelation of the messages we are studying. Guided faith results in better choices, and better choices reduce emotional exhaustion, creating a virtuous cycle of transformation. For each of these steps, here are model phrases you can repeat and carry in your pocket. In the silence of waking, say, "I surrender what I cannot control." In surrendering from pain, say, "I accept this trial," and ask for the courage to decide clearly. In conversion, repeat, Help me repair and live in humility. In family prayer, use protect our home and align our decisions with good. In daily perseverance, murmur, grant me the strength to persist, one day at a time. These formulas are intentionally short because effectiveness comes from repetition and sincerity, not from the length of the words. By repeating them, you create life protocols that become habits and, in the long run, change the way emotions guide decisions. In practical terms, combine these words with small check-ins. After 7 days, take an honest look at yourself with questions like, has panic reduced? Have I made more thoughtful decisions? Have I improved the quality of communication at home? These simple indicators measure real impact and help avoid the traps of imagination, where spiritual practice becomes merely momentary solace without transformation. The change we seek is both internal and external, or transformation that encompasses mindset, habits, and choices, with tangible effects on finances, relationships, and emotional health. There are also fine-tuning steps you can take to adapt to your situation. If you live alone, replace family prayer with a weekly community meeting or a brief phone call with someone you trust. If your routine is too tight, break the 5 minutes of silence into 2.5-minute sessions. If you're emotionally resistant, start with just 3 days and then expand. The principle is the same: simplicity, repetition, and evaluation. These are the behind-the-scenes aspects of change, small actions that, over time, yield great revelations and reconfigure the journey. The goal is to create tools that work in everyday life, not idealized practices that only serve the purpose of retreats. By adopting this mini-guide, you bring spirituality into the realm of practical, measurable decisions, making prayer a concrete ally in times of crisis. The transformation we seek isn't instantaneous, but genuine. It's born from routine, daily choices, and the courage to honestly experiment with a method. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because from here on, we'll see real examples of applying these steps in everyday situations and how small decisions triggered significant changes. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Now that you know this, see how a life aligned with these principles actually unfolds in practice. Not in newspaper headlines or sensationalist headlines, but behind the scenes of ordinary life, where small, repeated decisions generate real and lasting impact. I want to tell a short, credible, and intimate story, because nothing is more convincing than seeing how other people transformed fear into practical steps. I call this person Mariana, a fictitious name, but inspired by so many stories circulating. She was a teacher with 3 children, a tight schedule, and the constant feeling that the ground beneath her could disappear at any moment. A school settlement, an unexpected bill, and the anxiety that came from sleepless nights began to erode important decisions, accepting a bad job out of fear, fighting over small expenses, losing clarity about priorities. Mariana found, amidst the confusion, a prayer group that studied the messages of Medjugorje with a practical emphasis, not as a spectacle, but as a method. She started with something simple and radical at the same time: 5 minutes of silence upon waking, a short phrase of surrender, and the practice of a quick family prayer before dinner. At first, there were days when nothing seemed to change. The hidden truth of this process is that transformation is rarely instantaneous, but gradually, her mindset shifted. The surrender she repeated in the morning freed up energy previously spent on anxiety, and this energy was used to make a decision: to calmly renegotiate debts instead of accepting the first offer that came along, to talk to her husband before making financial decisions, to listen to a repressed son. The impact was practical: less impulsive spending, slightly better nights of sleep, fewer domestic outbursts, and also profound, greater coherence between values and decisions. The change didn't come by miracle. It came because routine and intention began to guide choices, and choices change destinies. One episode illustrates this well. One Friday, upon receiving a job offer offering immediate pay, Mariana stopped. Instead of responding in the heat of fear, she took a breath, repeated the surrender phrase, and sought counseling for 2 hours. This pause, brief but sustained by the practice of silence, made her aware of unfavorable clauses that had imprisoned her routine and her availability for her family. She opted for a less immediate alternative, which required patience, but which in the medium term preserved her emotional health and domestic stability. This is one of the great revelations. Surrender and silence do not negate the need to decide. On the contrary, they make decisions wiser, less reactive, and more likely to generate true transformation. Mariana's journey also involved practical conversion, admitting mistakes, apologizing with concrete actions, and adjusting habits that were causing burnout. When she apologized to a friend for being harsh amid stress, it wasn't just a word. She offered time, listened without making excuses, and made a commitment to change her attitude. This simple gesture rekindled a friendship that later served as a network for her in a time of crisis, demonstrating how a conversion of the heart has a real impact on the support networks that sustain difficult decisions. The message here is clear. Repentance practiced with humility and concrete reparation is a social and emotional strategy that expands human resources around USA's shift in mindset that produces far-reaching effects. No less important is the role of family prayer in everyday choices. Mariana and her husband instituted a brief ritual before meals, a word of gratitude, and a joint intention of protection for the day's decisions. This small gesture created a conversational space where sensitive topics began to emerge more lightly. Decisions about spending, the children's schooling, and time priorities began to be discussed with less tension. The home ceased to be a battleground of impulses and became a laboratory for emotional governance. Small informal meetings, 5 minutes to align priorities and reconcile tasks. The practical impact was immediate: less emotional waste, more focus on decisions that actually yielded results. Perseverance was another decisive factor. In the first few months, the results were modest, and skepticism almost prevailed. But the choice to persist in short routine silence, surrender, conversion, and collective prayer created a compounding effect. Instead of an episodic change, a journey emerged. Marian realized that when practices become habits, even if minimal, the quality of decisions improves substantially. Less impulsive choices, greater planning ability, and a clearer understanding of what is urgent versus what is important. This transformation in mindset was reflected not only at home, but also at work, in relationships, and in her own emotional health. A practical truth that deserves to be stated honestly is that these methods are no substitute for professional support. At one point, Mariana needed psychological support to deal with chronic anxiety, and she sought it. The combination of disciplined prayer and technical assistance enabled her to make more solid decisions, reorganizing finances, establishing boundaries at work, and prioritizing rest. This integration of spirituality and practical action is one of the most common revelations behind the scenes. Faith without practical measures risks becoming empty consolation. Action without inner anchoring tends to be impulsive. Together, faith and method form a life architecture, capable of facing crises with greater wisdom. There was also a community aspect that proved essential for Mariana. Participating in a small group that tested the messages in everyday practices created support, verification, and accountability. On the most discouraging days, someone from the group would call, offer perspective, and help check decisions. The community served as a healthy filter against excesses and as a space for exchange, where experiences and revelations became collective learning. This reinforces another central idea: effective spiritual protection is often collective. It is a network that amplifies sound decisions and minimizes risks. In telling this story, I don't want to sell magic. It's not a promise of a quick fix. It is, as I said before, a journey. A journey of small repeated choices, of mindset shifts that generate real-life impact, and of decisions made with greater clarity. The authority of the topic arises not from speculation, but from the combination of visionary accounts, community practice, and tangible results in concrete situations. When prayer is integrated into verifiable habits, it ceases to be a fleeting consolation and becomes a tool for daily life. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. And, starting from this plausible case, we'll look at the practical details you can replicate yourself: visual cuts, voice tones, BRO moments, and how to modulate the rhythm between information and testimony to keep the viewer engaged. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If this content truly resonated with you, leave a comment saying I'm with you until the end. I want to see who made it this far. And also read which practice you'll start trying this week. Giving a like is a simple way of saying that this type of conversation deserves more attention. It helps me understand what to bring in more depth and continue providing practical tools for your journey. If you want to follow more guides like this, model prayers, family routines, and applicable examples, subscribe to the channel. That way, I know I must continue producing with a focus on transformation and real impact, always with responsibility and care. Thank you for staying with me this far. Your presence here already constitutes a community seeking clarity in decisions and comfort in trials. There's a video here that complements this topic with a step-by-step guided prayer. Click and stay with me there if you want to put these ideas into immediate practice. I'll leave it at that. Grateful for your attention and the space you provide to learn and grow together. See you in the next video.